What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Mend the World podcast. I'm your co host, Cece Jones-Davis, with
Malika McKinley Cox.
that's who she
Hey.
is. That's who she is. And today I want y'all to know that I have the distinct privilege of interviewing Malika today because
Yay.
it's really important that you know who this person is. This podcast is her brainchild. We are here. I have this microphone in my face right now, and these curtains behind me right now. This chair that I'm sitting in right this minute because of this woman and because of this idea that she had to launch a Mend the World podcast. I just love that name anyway, Mend the World. And you need to know that whatever Malika calls on me to do, because she's such a quality person, such a brilliant thinker, such a creative, such a world changer, anything that she calls me to do, I'm going to do. I'm going to try not to half ass it. I'm going to try to do it well, but doggone it, I'm going to do it because Malika is just that kind of force in the world. Malika,
Yes, Cece. Um,
we are here to talk about you today. How are you feeling about that?
I'm feeling nervous. Being vulnerable is very hard, um, obviously, in the world today and the societies we created, but I do want to be vulnerable. I trust you with my story, so that means I trust you guys with my story as well. So everybody
Hmm.
know that you get a little insight, and we're also going to interview Cece, who I adore, wouldn't do anything without, and chose to do this video podcast instead of an audio because she is so gorgeous. So that's why she has the camera and the mic and the curtains because we couldn't do audio.
Well, I'm glad to be doing this with Malika with you. And, I know so many fascinating things about your journey that's kind of made you who you are and brought you to this place in life. And I want other folks to know it. But first, I want you to explain to folks how we met and before we get into your story.
Absolutely. So, I had been living in Northern Ireland in Belfast, which is a city that had been in part of the Troubles. If you're familiar with the about 30 years of conflict in Northern Ireland from about the late 60s, a little bit around the time of the civil rights movement in America, and then it started off really kind of like peaceful, and then it went into really more violent and cyclical until finally there was this amazing peace process, and I got to go and study it, and just
Mm-hmm.
really was studying how you make peace. Unfortunately, you had to really study war, so we studied
Mm-hmm.
all of these case studies from Germany to Rwanda to Cambodia to Sri Lanka to Israel Palestine and like 1948 and the displacements, the Nakba, all of these horrific events. And honestly, it just really took me out.
Mm-hmm.
I came back to the United States very depressed. And I think one of the reasons I came back that way was because when I was in Northern Ireland, I saw their issues between what would be considered the British or the Irish, the
Mm-hmm.
Unionists or the Republicans. You can call them Protestants or Catholics. And they weren't fighting over Jesus. It wasn't a religious war. It was pretty much it was a class war. It was a response to colonization. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, say what you will. And I was really saw it, but with two people who look identical. And listen, I'm just gonna say, when I talked to Irish Catholics, they were like, the other guys, their eyes are too close together. And when I talked to the British, the Unionists, they're like, yeah, those Irish, you can tell them apart because their eyes are too close together. And first of all, none of that was true. You only knew people if they were named like Sean or John. Okay, it was just like, was it an Irish name or is it an English name? Because ultimately, from what I understand, everybody is genetically the same. So I
Mm-hmm.
just was like, whoa, this is like back home. This is like what I see happening from somebody from the South, from a red
Mm-hmm.
state. Oklahoma. It's like I see these so many parallels, but back home it's like, oh my God, everybody looks um, very different in this fight, right? And yes, you have some black people who are on the right, and if you don't know me, my dad's black, my mom's white. I'm considered in the caste system to be black. So when some people don't think that I'm black, but I'm like, I'm as black as Kamala Harris and Barack Obama.
Hmm. That's
So
right. You sure are.
I'm black. So anyway, all that to say, you got people who look very different on these two sides. But here, I saw similar things, similar traits, and I was like, oh my God, like this is a thing that happens all over the world. This warring things that happen, people believing things about the other, people not seeing
Mhm.
the roots of very powerful people and land grabs and resource grabs. So all of that to say, I came back really depressed. I did my dissertation in Jerusalem, and I saw so many human rights violations. I would go to Bethlehem and have to go to the checkpoints. I saw the monstrosity that is the security wall, and this is all before, this is 2016, 2017. So I just was like, I don't know. I came back, I was so depressed.
Mhm.
I was ready to give up on justice work. I was like, what am I going to do? Maybe I'll go to Europe and be an artist, which is still my backup plan. I'm halfway there now, but I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And a friend of mine named Kim Bandy, who works with an organization in Oklahoma City, we call it the Mother Teresa of Oklahoma City.
And that she is. Shout out Kim Bandy.
But nonetheless, she's this really incredible woman who I deeply respect. And she's like, hey, come work for me. And I'm like, I can't get out of bed. Like, I can't get out of bed. And she goes, okay, well, you start on Monday and you'll be doing this and this is what you're getting paid. And I mean, I got up on Monday and I went to work. And I know that sometimes you have to rest and sometimes you have to work.
That's
I'm not going
right.
to lie. And sometimes you got to get on medicine because
Yep.
that also helped me get over my temporary inability to do anything meaningful or just have a life. So working for Kim, and she's like, "Have you heard of Cece Jones-Davis?" And I was like, "No." I was gone. I was in Europe for at least a year. Europe, and I mean, I was in Palestine and Ireland. Anyway, so I came back, and she's like, she went to Yale. She's a minister. She's really badass. She's like this amazing activist, and everybody's talking about her because we're from
Oh my
Oklahoma.
God.
We're in Oklahoma. Oklahoma, the Justice people, it's a small community.
It's a
It's
small little
usually
crew.
religious, so it's some Christians, it's some Muslims, there's some Jewish people, some Buddhists, but like overwhelmingly, it's like white evangelicals, and there's some great atheist, agnostic, and indigenous
Hmm.
spirituality people. So I'm not saying there's not, but in my world, I had come from a church Oklahoma City world, so it was like everything's a little not incestuous, but like small,
Yeah, it's
homogenous.
small.
So anyway, I was like, no, but I want to meet her. So I just remember going to your house, and Kim
That's
and I
right.
came up to the house, and I just remember walking the door and seeing you had that picture of that beautiful woman, black woman with like a, let's do it. You maybe have that
Oh
somewhere in your office.
yes, that's right.
Rosie the Rivet, but it was this gorgeous black woman. I mean, I was just like, oh my God, she's cool. I just
Oh
was
my
like in
gosh.
all of
I
you.
remember that day. I remember that day. You and Kim came to my house. We sat down. We were talking about just all things justice. And, I knew that we were going to be good friends from that day. Because I had
Oh,
been
me
in
too.
Oklahoma for a little while and I didn't have a tribe. I didn't know where I fit. And when you guys left, I was like, I belong to Kim Bandy and Malika Cox. That's where I belong. And so we've been riding hard ever since.
Oh
That was
yeah,
probably let's see, almost 10 years
2018.
ago. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we've been rolling ever
Or
since.
maybe end of 2017, beginning of 2018 for sure.
That feels,
So,
yeah, that feels right. And Malika, you've been such a like a good friend. You're such a good friend. And I want to talk about some of those examples a little bit later. But give us a little bit. So that's how we met. But give us a little bit
yeah.
of your own origin story. I know you're not from Oklahoma originally. I want
Oh
you
my
to
God.
tell us where you're from. I want you to tell us some things about your parents that you want us to know. And I want you to tell us what countries you've lived in.
Okay, so interestingly enough, when my parents got married, they got married in Chicago in 1966, and they went to back to Oklahoma for their honeymoon to see my father's uncle and aunt, who were kind of like his second set of parents. And it was illegal for them to be married in Oklahoma. So it was kind of like, I know Trevor Noah has a book, Born a Crime, but my parents were married as a crime in Oklahoma. Now I don't
God.
think that was the
What
case in
year was
Illinois.
this? Did you already say what year this was?
Oh, it was 66.
God.
1966 was right about the time the Loving case came out, but my parents got married. And my dad was from Kansas. My mom was from the East Coast. She was an army brat. She lived all over the world. And my dad was, working at American Airlines, and he was like the first black salesman. And he was also the highest ranking salesman. He is the most handsome man that's ever existed, dashing, debonair. My
He
dad
sure
was the
was.
real deal. And so, all of that to say, they got married and they moved to San Francisco, where I was conceived, and they were living back in the, what was it called? The Haight Ashbury period, where everybody was like, the hippies were out and everybody was trying LSD. I don't think my parents were on LSD. They didn't, not that they told me anyway. But that was like San Francisco back then, right? That was
Yeah.
the heyday. All the new thoughts. People, my mom talks about how everybody was like, the world is going to get better. But anyway, we're going to make the world better, but it got a little worse before. Anyway, so, um, but it got really scary there for a bit because 1968, my mom was pregnant with me, and I'll never forget the story. She told me, obviously, I don't know about it, but she said they were watching Bobby Kennedy give his talk at the Democratic convention, and my dad, who I believe has a bit of a prophetic gift, said to my mom, "That man's not long for this world." And then they came
Mm,
back; he had been assassinated, and
mm,
so around then, Dr. King was assassinated, and of
mm.
course Malcolm X, who I'd been named for because Malcolm X had taken the name Malik, and they thought I was going to be a boy. So anyway, I was probably they were thinking I was Malik, and they wanted me out of the country, and so my mom and dad left San Francisco, moved to Spain, and I was born in Spain because of the fact that Dr. King was assassinated, Bobby Kennedy was assassinated, Malcolm X was assassinated. So I was born because they were done. They were like, this is not a safe place for a mixed race couple. I was
Mm-hmm.
born in Spain. My first memories in Spain, you know, we lived in Madrid. I was born in Madrid, but we lived in Torremolinos, which is this beach town, and I just remember being at the beach. I consider myself a mermaid because, like, the beach is my home, my first
Mm-hmm.
memory, and it didn't. Europe then was still maybe a little bit more progressive, but it was still hard
Mm-hmm.
for interracial couples. So they moved back to California. We lived in California near the beach in Venice Beach, and lived there till I was 7. And then my first 7 years, I'm in the Garden of Eden. I'm in like the most beautiful place in the world. I think of the movie 1984 with Wonder Woman, where she's in at the Mascara, and then she goes to London, and it's like World War II, and he's like, what do you think? And she's like, it's horrible. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
that was like my kind of thing to
Coming from
Oklahoma.
California to
Yeah,
Oklahoma
coming
when
from
you,
Venice Beach, California, where I'm out every day
yeah.
at recess
Woo.
on the Pacific Ocean with palm beaches and palm
Yeah.
trees, and just loving it. But I moved to Oklahoma. I will say this for Oklahoma: some of the most incredible, amazing people I've ever
Yes.
met in the whole world.
100%.
So I will give you that. And Oklahoma
Okay.
also has some drop dead gorgeous places.
Mm-hmm.
We saw Broken Bow. I was like, oh, where is this? I've never been here before. I mean, Oklahoma can be beautiful, but we moved to Oklahoma City, and my first encounters were, I knew I was mixed race. I knew theoretically somebody had problems with it. I had no idea how embodied that was going to be. People
Yeah.
didn't like my mom
I
and
mean,
dad being
let's go back
together.
1 second, Malika. Let's go back. Your mom and dad got married in '66. It was illegal in
It
'66
was
because
illegal for them to be married.
I don't think the Virginia versus Loving case was won until 1968. And
It's
so
67 or 68. Yeah, I can't
yeah,
remember.
yeah, and
But it was
so
illegal for them to be married. Oh yeah, absolutely.
it was, yeah, so absolutely. I mean, interracial couples, particularly in the South, were going through hell. So I
Oh
can
yeah.
only imagine the journey of your mom and dad. But okay, you were talking about just the embodied, how racism was embodied in Oklahoma.
Yeah, and I will say, when my parents went to Oklahoma for their honeymoon, my aunt, Mildred, she packed the car with food for 3 days because they were going back to California, and she didn't want them to stop anywhere to
Yeah,
eat. Because there's the
yeah.
Green Book and all of that, but she
Hmm.
did. She knew they may have to stop for gas. My dad told me once, he goes, "If I get pulled over, I'm like, I'm gonna say this crazy white woman kidnapped me." But anyway, it's my father. He has a sense of humor.
Hmm.
But anyway, they went straight to California. Hate Ashbury, so that was that world. Came back, lived in California. Still, again, like I mean, it didn't matter. It was the '70s. Things were changing. It was California. I lived on Paradise Island. It was just beautiful. And we moved to Oklahoma, and it was a big deal. And it was a big deal because
Yeah,
Oklahoma is so segregated. So we began.
yeah,
We lived in a part of Oklahoma City that's all black with my aunt and uncle. And I mean, my mom was like a space alien to everybody. Of course, there was
yeah,
no power dynamic, so I would not call it racism or oppression, but it was just like shock. And all of a sudden,
yeah,
I started to realize, oh, this is different. This is unique. And next, we moved to more of a shared space in Oklahoma, but not shared space like a pleasantly shared space, like a hostile shared space. And so it was like, no matter, I didn't have a clique. I didn't have a group of people to
yeah,
fit in. I discovered two things that are arbitrary forces of violence, and one is racism, and the other is tornadoes. Like
mm,
legit. I learned what tornadoes were, and not to mention snow. My parents kept saying, "Oh, there'll be snow." I didn't know that that wasn't very much fun in Oklahoma. So I
mm,
grew up very discouraged because I knew a world where people
yeah.
were not, I wouldn't say not racist now. From a little kid's eye,
Maybe
not
less
racist,
racist, right?
but at least less racist.
Or at
And
least
I
it was
wasn't
less
aware of it. I mean,
obvious. Yeah,
clearly there was racist parts, but nonetheless, I
yeah,
mean, I had two sisters on my dad's side who lived in LA, and so it wasn't like I was completely. I understood that I was, half black as opposed to them being black, and so there was
right.
definitely some dynamics, but I wasn't experiencing full out racism like I was, as I
Yeah,
was called the N word when I was a kid. My people were very unhospitable to my parents. We moved to Oklahoma. We quit going out to dinner together. I think it put a real strain on their relationship because we just got tired of the gawking and looking. And I remember people coming up to us in the mall. I remember we just had, it was very hostile. And then when they quit going out together, I would go places with my father. We'd be treated really poorly. I go to the same place with my mother, and we'd be treated very different. And I mean, I'm just seeing these
mm,
two worlds, and it's just, I wasn't in touch with my rage like I am now. Like, I'm generally so angry about it, but I became a kid who I ate a lot. Like, I
yeah,
really that was this chubby teenager who just kind of wanted to be invisible. And I had a friend, her name was Lucinda, and we just were like these two
mm,
kids who just pretended like the rest of the school didn't exist. I grew up in
yeah,
the drama club, hanging out with all the goths and the kind of outcast kids and the theater
yeah,
kids, and it was my escape. Theater was
yeah.
my escape.
Malika, I wonder, hearing this part of your story again, because I've definitely heard it, but hearing it again really brings into focus for me your like how you got into justice work, in
Oh yeah.
particular how you got into racial justice advocacy. And I want to get there, but you just talked about hanging out with the with what many would call, the world would call, the strange kids, kind of.
Yeah.
And I know that another really pivotal time in your life is when you left Oklahoma as a young person and you moved to New Orleans. You've told this story and it's
Mhm.
powerful every time I've heard it. But you talk
Yeah.
about, can you tell us about why you moved to New Orleans and what happened there?
Well, I will say as briefly as I can. So, as this kid who was into theater, I really wanted to go back to California. I wanted to be an actor. I'd wanted to be an actor since I was 5. Like, I just was like, I want to be in movies and theater and everything and TV, whatever I could do. And so I actually did, when I was 19, moved back to California, went to school, did some studied acting. I didn't do any acting. I was in like some plays and things like that, and a couple like extra stuff. But I was really into it. But I started to face, and I know I'm getting to Louisiana, but I wasn't. I was only cast as like a maid. You know what I mean? I would be only
Yeah.
cast as somebody because people thought I was Latina. So I was
Yeah.
getting
Yeah.
roles as a servant, like, or getting like,
Yeah.
I might get something like, okay, you can do a print model. You're the desk clerk, but I was never the guest. So you know what I mean? I got kind of turned off, and it was what, the late '80s, early '90s, and so I ended up moving to New York for a while. Thought I'd do acting out there, and just kind of grew a little. What's the word? I lost my dreams. I didn't see people who looked like me doing that stuff. I mean, eventually there's Halle Berry and all these people who came out, and now we have this incredible, like,
Mm-hmm.
amazing actors of every, like Lupita Nyong'o. But I mean, nobody who looked like me. So everybody
Right.
was blonde, blue eyed, and I just gave in to kind of like purposelessness because I was going to be an actor. That was my thing, and I lost that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And I, lived in New York for a while, started to do a lot of, I'm just going to be, I did a lot of drugs, I partied a lot, I hung out with like actors and musicians, and my job was just to kind of be there as a, cheering them on and being kind of a fangirl. And I didn't have a lot of purpose. So I ended up moving to New Orleans because my friend, his name is Jack. I hope he doesn't mind me saying this. But anyway, I went to visit him in New Orleans, and I had just worked as a waitress, server, bartender, whatever. So I could just get enough money to go out, hit the clubs, hit the bars, stay out till 4 in the morning. And I went to visit New Orleans. I'm like, this place is unreal. Like, I went down as kind of an agnostic, but you don't leave New Orleans as somebody. In New Orleans, like, nobody stays an atheist. Like, you don't know what you believe, but I'm telling you, there's stuff down there. It is below sea level. It is in
Wow.
the ocean, guys. There's something funky about New Orleans. So anyway, I went down
Wow.
there, and Jack's roommate just moved out, and he goes, "You want to stay here?" So I just stayed. So I just literally was on vacation, moved in, got a job at this restaurant called the Louisiana Pizza Kitchen, and I was a server there. I was, by this point in time, I had gone totally goth. Like, I was taking all my theatrical skills. I had learned makeup, hair, costumes. I wasn't doing in the theater anymore, so I was doing it at night. My friends would come. We would take 2 to 4 hours just to do our makeup and our hair. I would wear, I was called the corset girl. I always wore corsets and like at least 6-inch platform shoes. I'd have black or blue like lipstick. I mean, black
And what
eyeliner.
drew you? What drew you to the golf culture in the first place?
I think I just loved the theatrical, the dramatic.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
also somebody who doesn't do anything halfway because I went from goth girl to like born again Christian. So keep in mind, I'm a pendulum girl. So
It's
anyway,
either or.
yeah, and
Uh-huh.
it's really interesting because I really do think I'm integrated now, but I went like, didn't know my, didn't have a community per se. And I know that some people complain about mixed race kids. They're like, they're always talking about not belonging or liminal spaces. But I mean, it is my story. So I've always never really belonged anywhere. And so the goth culture was like misfits and outcasts and drama and makeup and hair and clothes. And like my roommate Jack would say, I was, I should have been born a man because I needed to be a drag queen. Because like you go to his room and everything would be like sports, and you go to my room and it's like boas and glitter and platform and tulle. And I'd walk out of the house and stay out till I remember staying out till 10 in the morning. We would go because New Orleans is pretty much you can do whatever you want there. So anyway, the thing was, when I was there and I found out my grandmother had been praying for me, I really started to like, I was turning 28. I was getting old for that life. And I was really like, there were very famous bands in New Orleans that I could mention. I'm not going to say what bands they were, but they were more on the goth side of famous bands. And, they were there when I was there. And it was like this whole world and subculture that I was a part of. And I just started to get tired of it. And I started to feel like something really eerie, something bad was going to happen. It's gotten really involved in like some mystical things. And I don't have any problem with mystical things, but like everything that I was receiving was like bad trauma, tragedy. And I just felt in my
Dark.
gut something was wrong, dark, something bad was really going to happen. And I remember just going through like a couple of days of just like something bad's going to happen. And everyone's like, you're making this up. That's not true. Nothing bad's going to happen. I remember waking up one day, December 1st, 1996, and I grabbed my roommate's Bible, Jack's Bible, just grabbed it because I didn't want to go to work. And I think, Malika, you're overreacting. And remember,
Mm,
it fell to Psalm 56:13. It said, I've kept your feet from falling so you can walk in the light before the living God. And I don't know what
mm,
it was about that scripture, but I just said, I'm going to go home. I'm going to go to
mm.
Oklahoma City. So I went to the airport. Keep in mind, no internet, at least not really commonly used, no cell phones. So like I went there, I called my mom. I said, Mom, I'm getting on the plane in a few minutes, and can you pick me up? So anyway, I got on the plane, and by the time I had gotten on the plane, three people had been murdered on the shift I was supposed to work.
At
So
the pizza place.
at the Louisiana Pizza Kitchen, it was my boss and two of my close friends, one of my best friends, and I didn't know yet. Again,
Mm.
we didn't have cell phones. So I
Yeah.
went out with some of my friends back home. I came home. My mom left a note on the door saying, You need to come home. I have something to tell you. I came home. I found out that a robbery had happened in the morning, and my friends had been killed.
Mm.
I needed to call Jack. Jack had my dog. Um, and I was devastated. Obviously, it's devastating to lose people you love in a violent way. And since then,
Yeah.
gun violence has been kind of out of control. Before that, gun violence that I knew of, was not, was like in certain places, but I couldn't wrap my brain around. And then came the guilt that I knew something bad was going to happen and I didn't share that information.
Mm.
And somehow I felt responsible. And so I was just devastated. And I remember it was that week I was crying and having panic attacks. And I remember my friend called me and she's like, Listen, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. She goes, Well, you can pray this prayer. And so I ended up praying the sinner's prayer, which if you know, you know.
Mhm.
And in that moment, I felt something mystical happen. Like I really did. It was like I felt something unload on my shoulders. I felt something in my spirit. I felt peace for the first time in a few weeks, months, whenever. I felt like everything was gonna be okay. Of
Mm.
course, that didn't last, but I felt it. I prayed, and I felt something, and it was like, whoa. When you're not raised in church,
Right.
that's
Right.
like a huge thing.
Yeah.
And so for the next few years, I kind of just dug that trauma. Like my coping skill was because people are like everybody knows about psychology speak and trauma, but nobody talked about trauma back then unless you were
Right.
in the
Of course.
military.
Oh
If you were in the
no.
military, you could have trauma, you could have
No, no,
PTSD.
no.
Nobody talked about trauma back then. So you was just like, forget about it. It's over. That happened. And so anyway, I kind of buried that and I decided to be somebody else because now that identity didn't fit anymore. And now the identity was Christian. And what did that look like? And it took me a while before I found a church and I really felt content. And then I got pulled into a church and honestly, at first I loved it because everybody was kind and they knew I'd gone through something. And it was cool. It was like, I was like, oh, there's this whole other life, the inner life, and I was discovering something beautiful and that felt ancient.
Mm.
However, then came the indoctrination.
Yeah.
And so then you have the this is what you believe. I remember being handed a book on the foundation of Pentecostal theology and handed it and like this is what you believe. It was no like what are you feeling? What do you think? It was like, okay, now here's what you do. Now you have to renew your mind. Well, what does that mean? Oh, this means you do these things even if you don't feel like doing these things. This is your identity even if that you don't think this is your identity. And
Yeah.
so over the next few years I really got indoctrinated in a way of Christianity which later when I got my theology degree and I went and spent time in Palestine and, so many things that I had been indoctrinated with just weren't a part of the early church or Orthodox Christianity or anything to do with Jewish ethics or anything that Yeshua or the early church would have been a part of. All of that to say, I had to unlearn and deconstruct a lot of things around
Yeah.
Western Christianity. They had nothing to do with the Eastern rabbi Yeshua who lived in Palestine and his teachings.
Yeah. And Malika, I've learned so much about your faith journey, your spirituality journey, and I know how important that moment was in your life, where you lost your friends, you had this sense not to go to work, you didn't go to work, you read this scripture in Psalm, and you went and got on a plane, and your life was probably saved as a result, right? I think anything like that would draw somebody to God. I
Mm-hmm.
really do. And so, then you get into, can we call it white evangelicalism?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is. And keep in mind,
Yeah.
it's, I was drawn to the dark and then I was drawn to the bright,
To the
gleaming
bright,
light.
bright light, right? And
And that
I mean,
light, yeah, I mean, the
yeah,
enemy, they say the enemy is, the what of the light or like, so I was drawn into white supremacy,
yeah,
evangelical, patriarchal religion because it was rigid in rules. And I just thought, okay, first of all, I felt guilt. I
uh-huh.
will redeem myself, the whole
By
penance. And
getting
then I
getting a
also
super,
was like,
super structure.
and it was so structured. It was like
Yeah.
A and B equals C. Do these things, get good. Do those things you used to do,
Yep.
get bad.
Yep.
And now
Yep.
you and everyone you love will be blessed. And
Yep.
so it was like, okay. And I held that. Even when I didn't even believe in it anymore, I was in that world. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Even when I
I
had
do.
deconstructed so much of that theology and mindset, but I was like, still felt some loyalty to the people. But it was, yeah, I believe firmly to this day it was Christian nationalism, Zionism, Christian Zionism, white supremacy, evangelicalism, and keep in mind I'm still would consider myself Christian mystic, like Eastern Jesus, yes,
Yeah.
Western Jesus,
Yeah.
blonde,
Yeah,
blue
I
eyed,
understand, because once you get a hold of Jesus, Jesus is hard to shake, folk. I'm telling you, the church might not
yeah,
be hard to shake. I mean, most of us
it's
can take or leave the church itself, but Jesus Christ is something hard to shake. So I totally understand what you're saying, Malika. Tell us a little bit, and also when I said, you went into white evangelicalism, I just want people to know, and lots of people out there already know, there are all kind of black folks in white evangelical
yeah,
spaces,
oh,
especially
100%.
right, especially in that time frame. I was in white evangelical space at the very, very same time and learned a whole lot of great things that I carry with me today. But I want to know, in terms of your story, Malika, what were the things, or what was your last straw that led you out?
Yeah,
Because one thing that I know about you, when you are committed to something, you are committed. I know that
yeah.
about you. And I mean, it has to be something very, very serious to push you off your square and to something else. So I want to know what that was for you.
Yeah, it's interesting. This kind of my pattern in life is life, death, and resurrection, which I think is the pattern of the universe, which is the pattern of Christ, which is the pattern of, half a dozen creation stories and myths. Um, I do think that for me, it was like I was born into something mystical, and and I remember as a little girl, my grandmother, my dad's side, taking me to church and getting me on my knees and praying to Jesus, and so I felt like
Mm-hmm.
in that moment, I felt that mystical, spiritual thing, and I felt it
Yeah.
again that time, and I prayed it on the couch. But
Mm-hmm.
I went in for the first few years, and I would even say even the first few years, like it wasn't as extreme. The it was multicultural. We had black pastors, we had women pastors. Our senior pastor and his family, obviously the senior pastor was white, but I mean, but it changed, right? It became more. It became more white male pastory. It became more,
Hmm.
and his son started to take over. It was all white male, bros, um, guys with tattoos. Everyone wanted to be like Hillsong, which I eventually ended up at Hillsong Church, but that's another day story. Um, and I would say pretty early on, I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Like in the first few years, I think I became a really good Pharisee. Like I was like, okay, you have to do eight, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and anybody who doesn't, I'm judgmental. If I don't do it, I'm judging myself. It was like I'm either
Yeah.
happy because I think I hit the mark, or I'm completely devastated because I failed God. God hates me. We're all going to burn in eternal conscious torment, which
Mm.
I don't believe in anymore, by the way. And I deconstructed through actual Greek, Aramaic, and Hebrew. But anyway, um, but then not for long. I couldn't do it. I couldn't believe that God sends people to hell. I loved the Spirit, the Holy Spirit. I think the Holy Spirit was a huge thing because of the church I was a part of. They were like, invite the Holy Spirit. But I had a real spiritual connection, and the Holy Spirit, Ruach Kavod in Hebrew, is feminine. It was like so I had this feminine spirit who was loving and nurturing and motherly in my life. And however that looks, I know that sounds wacky, but Eastern contemplative practices are like this. You get still. It's the inner
Mm-hmm.
life. Buddha talks
The
about
inner
this.
life.
You can look at Ayurvedic and this whole wealth of a world inside, and it's not. It is more Eastern Christian, but it's very Eastern, and that's what I think people don't understand, that Christianity's origins are the East, and even the Eastern Orthodox Church theology is so much closer to the early church than the Western Church. I think is heretical. I mean, I'm sorry to the Pope. I mean, I love Pope Leo. But anyway, all that to say, um, but it was a thousand cuts, death by a thousand cuts.
Yeah, yeah.
So you got, first of all, my best friend in the church is a gay man.
Mm-hmm.
He's not out, but like we all know, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I've had so many gay friends, but the leadership was uncool with it. And I do remember going back to work there one time, and I didn't believe in hell. I totally didn't have, like, I didn't believe in most of the things, but at that point I was working there, and I was told that I had to get on the stage, and it was during the same sex, when it passed, same sex
Oh,
marriage passed.
same-sex marriage.
Yeah, and I was told on Sunday we're going to go up on the stage, and all the campus pastors. I was the executive director of that campus because I was a woman. I wasn't the campus
Mm-hmm.
pastor, but I was an interim kind of
Mm-hmm.
pastor type figure. They're like, you got to go up there and say we believe in traditional marriage, and I was like, I'm not doing that. I don't believe that.
That's
You
courageous.
know, yeah, and so I just said to people who've been like my other set of parents, like, I can't do that. Like, I'm not going to do that. And I didn't even, I don't really believe in anything you guys believe in,
Mm-hmm.
And so I will say seminary theology, where they go and tell you to forget everything you learned, and then learning
Yep.
Hebrew is mostly
Yep.
is poetry. Genesis is a parable, I believe, about the agricultural revolution. So much of the things that Christian nationalists take as literal is literally metaphorical and myth. And then the things they tell you that are figurative are things like love your neighbor. It's the most
Mm.
absurd upside down,
Mm.
right? It's the most absurd opposite day. And it's like, okay, well, I, was done, and I did my, traveled the world for a little bit and did the degree and came back. And then by then they had, like, the church, I had heard that they had done a rally before the election because I wasn't home when Trump was elected the first time. And everyone's like, who you have to vote for because
Woo.
pro-life. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Anyway, I had an incredible woman, and she knows who she is. I mentioned her on another podcast, and I remember going to her, and because I had like seen her in a dream, and so and again, I'm mystical. That you guys might think I'm crazy, but this is just who I am. And I went to her, and I was like, I feel like you have a message for me. And she said, decolonize your faith. She got
Mm.
her my face. She pointed her finger at my face, and I was like, oh. And that, you know who I'm talking about.
And
We
that'll
love
put
you.
you on a journey.
And so I did. And I mean, as we did the table together. You
Yep.
did the Justice for Julius campaign and like got a man off death row. We got to watch that. That was like a
Yeah,
literal
and
miracle.
but let's go back. Let's go back. You
Okay.
were like the founder, a founder of the table, which we worked with
With
each other
Jonathan and
with
Nicole.
Jonathan
Yeah.
Martin and Nicole, and built a church community, we could call it, called the table, and we it was mostly for like the nuns and duns, folks who have been burned by the church or have been,
Outcasts,
right,
misfits.
outcast, deconstructing, all of these things. And Malika, I'm telling you, if it wasn't for you, the table would have just been an idea. You have just incredible skills to be able to have a vision and then see it through. And I think this podcast is yet another testament. But I wanted to stop there and just say that about the table. I want to get to, because I know we need to do a part two, actually, about
Yeah.
Malika. Can we do that? Because I know
Oh,
we're running
absolutely.
out of time, but there's so much to your story. One of the
Well,
things
I'm
that I value,
57 years old. I will say
yeah,
that is a reason
listen,
why there's a lot.
one of the things that I value so much about you is your, yes, you're brilliant. Yes, you're beautiful. Yes, you know so many things, right? But you're just such a good friend. And I said this in the beginning. You have taught me a lot about balance. You established the Chrysalis Retreat, which
Yeah.
kind of brings folks who do justice work into spaces of rest and give us a theology of rest and give us opportunity to rest in beautiful places like New Mexico. And I
Love
have
New
learned just by
Mexico.
watching your life and listening to you, I've learned so much about the importance of taking care of self. Now, am I up to par with taking care of self yet? No. No, I'm not.
Not.
But I'm on my way. I want you to say a little bit before we
Yeah.
close about chrysalis, about rest, and
Yes.
about the role you feel like that plays in our life. And will you commit to doing a part two of this, because we got a ways to go in your story.
Absolutely. I would love to. And I can't wait till I get to interview you also. But yes, part two. And I'll just say about rest. So we know my story, right? To the degree that I, never fit in. I've always been kind of reinventing myself when things don't work out. I
Yeah.
went from like California Sunshine Girl to like an outcast in Oklahoma to like drawn into the goth scene in New Orleans, this darkness, and then pendulums to this really bright light, and at times artificial stage light.
Mm. Mm.
So all of that to say, coming to this place of rest has been really like that pendulum trying to kind of go back in the middle. And I will say that um, I, about 10 years after the Pizza Kitchen murders, I was working for the church. And this is before I was like, I'm out. This was 2006. I
Mhm.
had worked myself to burn out, and that's when I learned like I couldn't get my body out of bed. I felt like my body had betrayed me. I was so tired. I was working 60 hours a week, and then I was working 20 hours at Starbucks so I could have health insurance, so I could do what I wanted to do for like $500 a month for a
Mm.
stipend. And not saying I had to do that. That was my choice. I went into
Mhm.
indentured servitude on my own,
Mhm.
and but I had worked my body, and I just had to take a break. And I remember trying to over religious, like I was doing scripture. I was working so hard to figure out how I could cure myself, and everything I did made it worse. And so I had just given up, and I started to do baths at night, and I would put myrrh and I would put frankincense. I would do all these oils. I would get up in the morning and put at least 5 minutes of sunshine on my face. I started to do walking, slow walks, and meditative circles, and all what I was doing was just contemplative practices. But it's a form of rest, right? And
Right.
so we need to do a whole thing on rest. But I will say shortly. So I really felt this kind of Sabbath desire. So I spent the next 10 years working, well, I wouldn't say 10 years, but I started just studying Sabbath and the Bible, studying the concept of Sabbath, the concept of rest, because I had I was so prone to go full on to the light action, but I started to like put these boundaries of rest. Well, then I want to shout out Trisha Hershey, because she's the one who I got the like, oh, this rest thing is an individual. This is actually a political act. It's a political act of reparation for like my ancestors who were enslaved. There's a whole political thing, and I think I discovered her in 2016. So 10 years later, I found Trisha Hershey, and then started looking at James Baldwin and Audre Lorde and Bell Hooks, and realized that this is like a Black resistance thing, right?
Yeah.
So I knew that as a first someone in ministry, and then someone who was a social justice practitioner, and even somebody who had studied peace, like had burned out, and I knew that I wanted social justice practitioners. I didn't care about like going into the wellness world, so people who can afford, rest, or basically indigenous practices, could like spend tons of money to get stuff that should be for everybody. So I cared about taking justice practitioners, people who were doing social repair, and getting them to space and forcing them to relax. And that's what the
Yeah.
chrysalis was, because that's the last stage that the caterpillar goes through before it breaks free out of the cocoon. And in that time, it just goes into this gooey place, but it reforms its skeletal with wings, and then it bursts out of the cocoon, and it goes to this metamorphosis. And it reminds me of the word repentance, but in repentance the way we translate it in English is butchered. It's metanoia in the Greek, and it's meta, like metamorphosis. Noia, mind, knowing. So it's like a transformative knowing. It's like what the butterfly goes through. So anyway, so this is what we started to do with the Chrysalis Retreat. We're like, we know you're changing the world. We know you're going 100 miles per hour. But what we're going to do now is we're going to come here, and we're going to experience rest. And we're going to be together in it. We're not even going to be alone in some sort of like spa mentality. We won't take everybody to the spa, but we're going to be together, and we're going to
Yeah.
do stillness. And so that's what that is. And honestly, I'm looking at the beginning of the year, and we'll let people know, but doing that again for 2027, maybe taking people to some pilgrimages, and also doing some
Right.
rest, because that's some of the stuff that Cece and I've done in the past. When I think through this podcast will open up opportunities for people to be a part of that. But we live in a society that is light focused, and has taken the words light and dark and somehow made them good and evil, and that is colonization. Dark is so important. Dark is nighttime. Dark is the seed in the soil before it sprouts the light. Dark is in the womb when conception happens. Dark is feminine. And somehow this swing, yin and yang, yin is this dark and feminine and beautiful, and yang is this light and action, right? But like we've gone all yang, and now we've got this burnt out culture. Everybody's exhausted. We've got
I know, right.
unbridled capitalism, colonization, oppression of Black people and women. It's all this demonization of the yin, of the feminine, of the dark. So yeah, we've got to get back to homeostasis and balance in both yin and yang, and all of that together. But that balance is not easy in a world matrix that is meant to exhaust us.
Yes, 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 yes. And it could be, I would love to be a part of whatever goes on around rest in 2027. First of all, because I can foresee that I will need it. But second of all, because every rest pilgrimage I've been on with you has been transformative. And I've gotten a little better each time about resting and taking care of myself and knowing my worth. And that's been really special, really about, I call it your ministry. I think we should probably not just do a second part on Malika, because we've not even scratch the surface, I don't think. But we also should do something just around rest and
I
what
love
that means in terms of mending the world, how important that is. So, Malika, I just want to
yes.
say, as we're closing this particular segment out, how much I love you, how much you're valued, how much you give to the world, you give to this community, what a bright light you are, and can't wait for folks to even learn more about you. So, folks, we want to say thank you for leaning in with us and hearing Malika's story today. And we coming back because Malika got a whole
Yeah.
lot more to share, honey. This is a
Also,
deep
I get
woman
to
here.
interview Cece, who is my favorite person. And Cece, you know that. And I know this one was about me, but we can't not say that every event that we've done together, you have made incredibly better. Your
Oh,
presence, your heart, your passion, your drive.
mm-hmm.
You, you made together. We are a really good team,
I think
and
so.
I think so too. And we've got more stuff for you guys.
All right, y'all. Until next time, thank you for being with us on the Men the World podcast. Thank you,
Yeah.
Malika.